Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to another episode of FLoAD Conversations. Today, our topic is 1 year later, navigating the impact COVID-19 has had on our community's mental health, sponsored by LGBT Faith Leaders of African Descent. LGBT Faith Leaders of African Descent is a nonprofit organization that focuses on working with the Black and Latinx LGBT community. We do healing from faith trauma, and we also connect individuals with organizations that can support them in their marginalized status. I am RJ, or Ryan Hill. I'm the moderator for today, and I will introduce our panelists for today. Our first panelist is Dr. Katrina Roseboro-Marsh. Our second panelist, whom we welcome, is Abigail Skinner, who is a therapist. And lastly, we have Stephen Welch, who is a psychotherapist. And before I have you introduce yourselves, I just want to say today's conversation, we have invited therapists who work specifically with the LGBT community, as we've noticed that there have been mental health impacts and expressions as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have some mental health professionals who are here to answer some questions and to engage us via a dialogue. So we're happy to have you. So I'm gonna ask our panelists first, Dr. Katrina Roseboro-Marsh, if you would introduce yourself and your background for up to a minute.
Good evening, and it's good to be here. I got interested in this field by way of switching my major from pre-med to psychology. And as I was taking classes, began to learn that this was really my space of calling for healing. And continuing to learn psychology and began to say, it's a little too person-centered. So I ventured over into social work and got my MSSW and still didn't see the spiritual piece being brought into the therapeutic moment. So went back to school to get my doctorate, DMin in psychospiritual counseling, and have my own practice for about 15 years. To expand that and to hopefully do some changes in psychology, I'm now ABD for my PsyD.
Yay.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Abigail Skinner, if you would provide some information on your background. Thank you.
Thank you so kindly, RJ, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this moment and in this space with wonderful clinicians. I got into the field. I was a manager for a community health center in Chelsea, Manhattan, and I had just finished my first master's degree in public administration, and I didn't feel fulfilled. A part of me also felt like I wasn't in my purpose. I, as a Black trans woman, I definitely felt that I could be giving more to my community. I would often see my sisters come to the clinic and seek mental health services and walk away not being understood, validated, or affirmed. And I felt like I needed to respond to that because that is me. So I ventured off and I had the opportunity to get a second master's. I recently graduated from Touro College, class of 2020. Hey, And I recently passed my state boards in December of 2020 to make me a licensed master social worker. I came, hello. I came to this work because I wanted my sisters to see a reflection of themselves in the mental health field. I don't know many trans people that are in mental health, let alone trans people of color, let alone trans women of color in the field. And so I feel that my gift to my sisters is the ability to say that there is someone that understands them and that gets them. And that's why I'm here.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we have our last panelist, but not least, Stephen Welch. Please introduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Welch. I'm a psychotherapist with a private practice in Manhattan. And how I got involved in mental health was for my own mental health needs, actually, as a teenager coming from England to the United States. My parents are of Caribbean descent, Barbados. And the trauma of going from one culture to the next, even though I spoke English, Americans spoke English, but it was like two different worlds to me. So fast forward, and I also had a guidance counselor that told me I can come and see her at any time to talk about anything. So the value of speaking and sharing your feelings, I experienced that personally. So fast forward, I completed my master's in social work and been a private practice practitioner for going close to 30 years, and still feel very impassioned by it. I run, besides my individual work, I do run two groups. One is for women of color and one is for Black gay men. And both have been running for the men over going on 7 years and the women over going on 6 years. So the need to see a person that looks like me has been a very positive draw for both men, women, families, even for the children. They want to see a Black man, that type of thing. I can go more and more into that, but I also value and the importance of educating folks, especially folks of color, and specifically Black people, because there's huge stigma about mental health, and I really feel impassioned to reduce those stigmas as much as possible through education.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So we're going to go ahead and jump in here. I'm going to make my, introductory statement, and then toward the end of that, ask the question. And we can feel free to jump in and answer as you feel as you deem necessary. So, and we will post the same question to multiple people, and let the conversation occur naturally. So this particular event is to empower Black and brown faith leaders and those who serve the community as we observe an increase in mental health challenges in response to the global pandemic. Disenfranchised communities have less access to healthcare, fewer resources, and have been isolated from support systems. So we, faith leaders of African descent, we pose a question to you therapists. What trends have you seen develop over the past year in this demographic, whether you work with lesbians, gay men, trans folk? And then you can also please be specific about your subgroup. Again, gay men, lesbians, trans folk, etc. So
well, I can start the conversation. The subgroup I'll just mention is around Black gay men over 30, over 35, where there's already a sense of reduced safe places and spaces to really come together with other Black gay men in a non-sexual, non-drug, non-party scene, non-bar, that is just talking about your feelings, your growth, your challenges, being maybe the only Black man in your workspace, things of that nature. So one of the things that I've seen is that as Black gay men, and gay men in general, but as Black gay men, because it's more of a subgroup, the social circle becomes smaller and smaller for a variety of reasons, whether people leave, people pass away, whatever it is. But the main thing is, as Black men who want to really talk about their feelings, that group is even smaller, right? And so the further isolation of peers, you don't have opportunities to go to theater, to go to shows, to mix and mingle. And so that circle gets even smaller. So isolation and feeling disconnected from family, and especially other Black gay men. So for the increased isolation.
Anyone else?
Yeah, still along those same lines, unfortunately, the trend that I wouldn't say developed, but I would say has increased as Stephen was saying, is nothing put in place to sustain or bring together mental balance or wellness. It actually exacerbated it for us. And for example, one of the things that come to mind is hearing some stories around some of our LGBTQI plus individuals who are elderly, who already were kind of disconnected to a degree, but now we have COVID testing and we have now the COVID vaccine, and things were not put in place to support the already needs not being met for what the community needed to get to the facilities, to have the appropriate physicians to be able to consult with around the actual, if they became COVID positive with it. So again, unfortunately, not developed, but a sad exacerbation of how the system already is.
I would agree with all of my colleagues up here, but for the sake of taking space, I'm going to center myself specifically around my trans community. For me, it's not a trend that has been developed. It's actually a continuum of things that have been occurring prior to the pandemic. Even in the midst of this, trans women of color are still seeing our sisters being murdered, right? There's something to say that even in a pandemic, that still is occurring. It makes the world view us in a very less empathetic way, where this is a time that we should be coming together as family to overcome a pandemic, and that can't even happen because now, as trans women, more than anything, now we have to talk about seeking safety of our lives. And so what that does is it exasperates the anxiety that trans people face every day. It exasperates the isolation because now, even in a pandemic, you have to even be hyper vigilant and hyper alert. And then also, I want to say that it also adds on to this idea that we are not important. And that has its own way of impacting us mentally.
Wow, thank you. So it sounds like there have been some structural issues that have been exacerbated or revealed, and continued isolation from those who are already disenfranchised, and the continued devaluation of our personhood. So I'll be very honest, as a bisexual Black man, one of the things that kind of caused me to bring this to attention to our organization is that I belong, and I've been seeking support in some social groups, social men's groups, but also myself, a single man, I've been on some dating apps. And so I've recognized like an increase in people who want to engage in unprotected sex with multiple partners. I thought that was weird. I thought that people are increasing their drug use, even educated people and people who work in as social workers, case workers. I was really surprised. And so I noticed that these behaviors had multiplied amongst those who are in the know. And so I was like, wow, this has to be a result of emotional kind of hurt. This is an expression of housing insecurity, job loss, as you mentioned already, isolation, structural gaps that, again, marginalized people experience much more loss. And so I see the mental health, and people have been crying out. And I've had many conversations in my subgroups, but also on dating apps. Can you all speak to that? Because not everybody's educated, not everybody has a therapist, but I've seen some really unhealthy behaviors, and I have created some groups, but I'm also like, how can I help people who don't have access to health care, who may have questions or reservations about seeing a mental health professional? What can we do as faith leaders in our own groups?
I think for me, one of the things that I do intentionally in making awareness of my presence is trying to shift language that is more palatable for individuals. So I choose to use the word counselor, and that is a little softer for people to be able to grab a hold of than a therapist, because of the traditional stigma around going to therapy. And also just connected with the faith side of it. You know, the Bible talks about seeking counsel. So you can kind of frame it that way to kind of give them a different way to think about actually talking with a professional.
And before we have another guest respond, I'd just like to say we have had some technological issues, but we're in the process of resolving those. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with us.
One of the things that I would really encourage is for those faith leaders to really partner with mental health clinicians in the community. Psychologytoday.com is a website where you can find any therapist around whatever issue. So if it's around depression, or you want a female therapist, Black therapist, someone who's in your insurance if you have insurance, but to really begin to partner with a couple of mental health clinics, get to know who the director is. I was part of a grant where the church had a grant for mental health. And what would happen is if a parishioner came to the pastor with a particular stressor, they had a budget where they could allow that parishioner to come see me for 4 sessions. The parishioner does not pay anything. And they pay me, but for the parishioner, it's open access. And so those 4 sessions can allow me to, number one, decrease the stigma, validate what they're experiencing, and then refer them to other clinicians or services if that's what they wanted, or they will continue with me. So I think the faith leaders, and I have to say, since the 90s, faith, the religious groups and mental health has become much more overlapped and overlaid and woven together more so than ever before, because you want to meet the client or the person where they are. So that's one, how can I say, resource to really begin to search for. And even parishioners within the community, if they ask, is there anyone involved in mental health? Do you know anyone that is seeing a therapist? You can see me confidentially, and maybe you can get that person's name and add them to a list, or give them a call, find out if they would be open to getting referrals, etc. So that's just one recommendation.
And I want to piggyback on what Stephen is saying, because the partnership is key. So like one of the things that we've done at Rivers for years are those who are in mental health have partnered with the pastor, and we volunteer our time for those sessions. It's not paid. And we want to make sure that we fill in that gap as we are referring the individuals. And again, as I said, reframing it so that they're comfortable when they're coming in there with us, and when we refer them out, that they are a little more comfortable and know what it feels like to actually be in a therapeutic relationship.
And I also think other things that could happen is that if individuals may not have access to like mental health professionals, like, listen, it doesn't take much to run a support group. You already have the space, in a lot of the places of worship, right? So anyone that has a passion to connect, because that's what really therapy is about, is the therapeutic alliance, the ability to empathize and connect, to create support groups, right? Around maybe trauma, around grief, even art interventions as a way of creating community healing in places of worship. So there are many ways to orchestrate these things if you don't have essentially what we call the professional resource. These things can actually be done in our own backyard.
Awesome. Those are some wonderful, wonderful tools. Partnerships. I always say we partner in business. We partner. We are not an island, and that's the importance of having communities. That we lean on each other. What does the proverb say? It takes a village. And so I love this idea of kind of leaning on each other, and also in relationships saying, I don't have something, I'm in need, you have it. And there's going to be a time where we can reciprocate. And that's just, that's a wonderful practice in the community, but especially in mental health. And then the reframing, I love that idea, Dr. Roseboro-Marsh, because yes, when you say a therapist or a shrink, people shy away from, I don't want to, they don't think of somebody that looks like us, chocolate, caramel, etc. We think of someone of Euro descent. And so that does, changing the language and saying counselor seems a bit more palatable or relatable. And those are, I love those ideas. And then the support group from Abigail, I'm one to start support groups, but I feel empowered as a faith leader to say, oh, this is just something you can do. You don't need a certificate to do this. This is a way that our community already supports, and we can just continue to replicate that. And I thank you all for that empowerment, because that's what I feel through this education, through this conversation, that we are being empowered to not only get help, but to help our community further.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So that kind of leads into my next question, and I think there's going to be some overlap, but as a faith leader, we are faith leaders in the community. So are there any additional, what kind of structures can we implement to support? You did say support groups. And again, people have experienced compound losses, such as family deaths, job losses, housing losses, housing issues, isolation, suicidality, lack of exercise. So we talked about support groups and forming those. Are there any other recommendations or thoughts or practices that you've implemented in spaces?
I guess I'll jump in.
Sure.
Okay. I guess the first thing that comes to mind are online support groups, right? There's a lot of things that are available that folks can do online. And given COVID has actually increased access to mental health because things are much more available online. So even though, yes, there's a sense of lack of access, but on another level, there is access. And I think folks need to be encouraged to know that there is access. So number one, an example of a particular agency is NAMI, and I hope I get this right. It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which I prefer to use the term mental wellness. But that's the name of the organization. And they have online support groups if you're feeling depressed, anxious, if you're taking care of somebody with a mental health issue, or taking care of just someone as a caregiver, there's support groups for you. And there's things like a poetry support group, art support group, writing, all this in NAMI. This is one organization. The one other thing, the other resource I would throw out there is there's a lot of mental health available via text, that you can text a number and just communicate that way if you needed to. And so really look those services up. I mean, I don't want to look away from the screen, but I have a couple of things right here. I could just run them on. In fact, I want to look at one because I want to make sure folks can walk away with something very concrete. So 741-741 is a text mental health hotline 24/7. And when you hit that number, when you text, it will respond automatically right back at you. And what you type in is either hello or home, HOME, and it will start the connection process, again, automated, but then it'll eventually be sent to a mental health person.
Wonderful resource. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen.
And just as Stephen is saying, begin to be mindful of certain months, like this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I had my pen I was going to put on, I forgot. It is National Mental Health Awareness Month, and as a congregation, be intentional about doing some things. Whether you can have a mental health moment online in your service, where you begin to kind of demystify the stigma that's still there. And as Abigail was saying, see what gifts people have and what they want to do around conversations with the groups. There's one that, Rivers does, Shades of Blue, which is about depression, but those are a mixture of professionals as well as people who are not professionals that were willing to step up and, be taught how to actually run a group. Holding space is another one where you just go online and you share and you connect, and each week there's a topic or something for you to think about or talk about, not necessarily around mental wellness, but it's whatever comes into the room. Now, what would really be great in terms of the faith faith-based community is because, you know, faith-based, we love to take up offerings.
Right?
We should create an offering fund to offset people's mental wellness, because let's be clear, it's hard. It's hard to see a therapist. It's hard to get an appointment to particularly see a therapist of color. It's hard to get an appointment to particularly see a therapist of color that's either the gender or the sexual orientation you prefer. But if we had something to offset that, because, you know, even for people like myself that have a sliding scale, I only have so many spots. You know, I want to see everybody. And yeah, my wife can attest to that. That's something in our household, because my heart is like that. I want people to get the healing that they need. At some point, I got to make sure I can go buy a cheeseburger if I want to, you know. And that would be helpful to offset that cost so people can see, as Abigail said, the professional that mirrors or reflects themselves.
You know, this is a really great part of the conversation because there's so many innovative ideas. But one of the things that comes to mind is every Sunday, we know the church hands out a bulletin, right? And that bulletin can occupy so much information. You know, I could see a bulletin that has an inlay or a one-pager of just mental health resources that may have contact information, that might have links that a person can utilize, that might even give you the newest mental wellness apps that people can download on their phone. You know, also we have the leadership from the pastoral committee, right? We have the elders, right? We know sometimes, you know, the bishop might get in front of the church and say, I want y'all all to stand up and love your neighbor and tell somebody, you know, that you love them and how much. Well, I can also see a meditation exercise happening in 1 to 2 and 3 minutes. You know, the pastor say, you know what, I feel there's a heaviness. Let's get up. I want to demonstrate a meditative exercise with the congregation. And what these things do is they open the congregation to this idea around mental health because they're actually doing it, right? That's how you demystify the issue, is get people doing it, seeing it, talking about it continuously, not a one-off thing. You know, you might have a mental health Monday, right? Where people that have mental health inquiries might come to somebody that might be I don't know, an expert, you know, through a chat. There's so many ways to get this going. You just have to do it.
And I want to add one other thing that the church could be in the forefront of doing. And that's, you know, perhaps some of the implementations around Medicaid, Medicare, Medi-Cal, because some of it is overwhelming and stringent for the therapist to be able to take clients who have that. And let's be real, a lot of us have that. So it's to actually get in to see someone again that reflects us with what we have can be difficult. So we can start lobbying about that. We can start trying to shift and change what the requirements are for therapists to be able to take one of those, Medi-Cal, Medicare, Medicaid.
Wow, these are some wonderful ideas. All of them, from texting to raising funds and sharing funds, to using intentionality. The church bulletin. I love the meditative practice in a faith space. And I say faith space because not all of our participants or listeners are Christian or go to church. We do have those who practice African traditions, who practice Islam, etc. But wonderful ideas. I love how you all are bringing this to the forefront, because again, while I do have a therapist, these are not ideas that I would have come up with. And this is why you all are the professionals and we called on you. Wonderful ideas to do on how we can support communities and how we can share and how we can build within our faith spaces to support the idea of mental health as something that should be accessible, but also something that is it's normal. Like, we're all people. And this is in the same way we would go to the doctor or an attorney if we needed help or a CPA with our taxes. We should come to mental health services professionals in order to kind of like share our hearts and understand how to navigate the challenging periods and even the good periods, because good periods bring about their own set of challenges or thoughts. So this is a fantastic. I'm so thankful that you all are here helping us and our community. So this leads to my next question. So we've talked about what we can do as in faith spaces. We also talked about referrals. We talked about partnering with faith spaces in order to be able to kind of like normalize and to be able to provide services for parishioners or constituents. Are there any tools that you can give, like faith leaders? Many of us have relationships with those in the pews. And so they may not come to the church, but they may come to RJ and say, RJ, or I may say, wow, you look a little sad. Is it what's going on? And they kind of like divulge or spill their hearts. And while I am trained from a pastoral perspective, I graduated from Union Theological Seminary, and that is we study psychology, etc. Are there any tools that you can kind of share with me and other faith leaders who, from a listening practice, we can do while or before we refer them to you, before we can point them to a support group, before I can, say, oh, I'll help you engage your insurance and try to find a therapist? Are there any specific tools that you have for the individuals like me?
I'm going to start by saying it's very simple, and that is listening in presence. Because as you listen, the person will really begin to tell you what they need for you to do in the interim. They may not need you to say a thing. They may not even need you to help them make that connect. They may just need to hear themselves say it. So listen and let them guide you into how you can help them in that interim space.
For me, one of the most strongest pieces in this dynamic, again, and I'll go back and I'll reiterate it again, is the therapeutic alliance, which is the ability to connect, the ability to be vulnerable. And I just want to acknowledge that if someone is seeking you out to talk to you about what they're going through, that means that they are aware that you are a source of safety, a source of connection for them if they're looking to seek you out already from the very beginning. The only thing that may be asked is, how can I support you? What does support look like for you? How would you like for me to be in this moment with you? But listening and reflecting is key here, and understanding how important that relationship that you have and you hold space for is already by itself.
I really had to um, really kind of scratch my head on this one, but the one that came to my mind was a pastor could possibly let the parishioners know that they've blocked out an hour on Tuesdays, 2 hours on Saturdays, whatever that is. And you may have another lay leader that may have had some, workshop or two on mental health. That's the other thing too. The person that found me as part of their grant, she was an associate pastor that had some mental health training. And so she was able to bring that to the church. And then I was like the third level to that. We have somebody available. So that's just an offside kind of thing. It's important for the lay leaders or pastors to get mental health training to augment the mental health training they've already gotten through a theological blend. So creating like a space in a schedule or a peer that may be willing to, donate some of their time and just be a listening ear. Because I agree with one of our guests here is that sometimes it's not about solutions. It's not about saying this is what you need to do. It's just look at the parishioner in the eye, be on their level. Don't sit behind the desk, sit facing them, next to them. Reduce the barrier. And sometimes it's things like that. It's your body language. It's the therapeutic alliance is part of your body language. Are you looking at them? Are you saying, hey, Mr. Jones, and you're looking to the left, to really remove yourself and try to have a one-to-one with that person and just observe body language. There's some folks who seem more bubbly in the past and all of a sudden they're not so bubbly today. Sometimes you hear about somebody's family member passed away from COVID or something else. You may want to just touch base with that person. How are you doing? That type of what I call the soft skills. Coming up with solutions is like a hard skill. Soft skills is like putting a hand on the shoulder. Of course, if they're safe with that, hopefully there's a history known with your parishioner. But sometimes it's just listening to what they have to say. And I think, and it's just my guess, that sometimes faith leaders want to create solutions. They want, this is where you go, this is what you do. And sometimes it's not the solution. Sometimes the solution is actually not doing anything, but, as someone said, just being with them.
You all have said made some powerful suggestions. And what I gather from all of that is making space for human beings in the present. That's basically a culmination of what you all said. Making space, this is the United States of America. And typically, with not only being on the LGBT spectrum, but being invisibilized because of being devalued because of, so that's kind of affirming what you all have said, to make space, to listen intently and being fully present with our people. Yes, that makes me smile. When you can when your presence can help make someone feel seen. Yes. So I have another question, because we are in the city of New York, and New York, she is opening. So some have gone crazy. I had a moment with the reopening and started to see friends, but I am vaccinated and I do still wear my mask when I'm around people. I'm just being real, because I'm here, but I am a person. I do go to the park without my mask, but I'm more than 6 feet away from my people. I had a conversation with a friend who does social work, and and I was really concerned because of some of the interactions that I had again, in person, on dating apps, some of the conversation in some of my support groups. And now since people have been isolated, we've been locked up, and now we're kind of being free. And now since doctors' offices are reopening and bars are reopening, restaurants, are there any kind of expectations? I talked earlier about some of the behaviors that I've seen, noticed, and heard about that were really unhealthy during the worst of the pandemic. And so I'm wondering, as a faith leader, how should I be preparing for some of the complications or responses to some of those negative behaviors? Are there any trends that you expect from, because I even talked to a friend of mine and they said, wow, they've been drinking a lot more. And so now, since we're going to start seeing people and interacting people, what should I expect, and how can I navigate those waters so I'm not turning people off? Maybe that's a hard one.
You know what I heard out of this, RJ, is how do I navigate my own discomfort? That's exactly what I feel is coming to my mind, is how do I navigate discomfort? And it takes a level of introspect with oneself to really identify what is making me feel uncomfortable. Is it the fact that now I have to readjust to a world a year later? Does that mean I have to pick up everything where I left off and then now it's normal and I just go for it? Is it the idea of what is being, I guess, projected on us through social media and the news about mask wearing, vaccinations, that's making me anxious? Is it the fact that now I got to return back to work and I really like being at home, and it gave me a different opportunity to view things in a different light? Again, it's really about a level of introspect for the individual to really identify what the discomfort is and what is making me feel that way. Because right now, in the present moment, these things are happening, but we want to give grace and understanding that we have been moving forward, regardless if there's been a pandemic or not. We still are here for us that are on this side, and we are still existing. So that means that we have some form of resilience to transition and acknowledging that in this moment in time, just like we did a year ago, we made it here, and then God willing, we'll move forward and make it again.
Yeah, RJ, that is a very difficult question. And my thinking was kind of like Abigail said around that word of discomfort and the word introspect, because when we talk about the behaviors that we're seeing, I believe that part of it is due to this alone time we've been forced to have and forced to really get to see ourselves in a light and a way that the busyness and the noise of the world, the job, the go, the get, the do didn't let us do. So that's why I think the behaviors we're seeing are increasing, and particularly when you say the negative behaviors, because now already things that were present, such as, negative self-worth or self-view, have been intensified. And now I need to do something with that don't make me have to address it.
I'm having a tough time with the question. I think part of it is because are we talking about how, as a faith leader, how one can respond or look for issues that a parishioner may have or a colleague may have? I'm just trying to understand the question. My brain went in 400 different directions with your question. I have to admit it. Yeah.
So, and I guess I did ask a lot. So I'm one who likes to prepare for what's coming. And in my conversations, I'm like, whoa, I may start actually seeing signs, as a faith leader, as just a community member, of a close person who has been drinking during the pandemic and before they had kind of, they were known for being kind of like diligent. And so I'm now, whoa, how do I deal with that? And then some of the other dangerous behaviors that already exist in the LGBT community, but have been magnified. I am definitely one to have conversations, open conversations with friends, but I'm not a mental health professional. Just in my conversations, I've gotten a little uncomfortable with some of the things that I've heard, but then I know how to be there for people. And I'm wondering, as you all as mental health professionals, what have you heard, seen that can inform, what I may be able to expect over the next few weeks or months, because everything is opening up. Negative behaviors or positive behaviors that I may be able to help with as a faith leader or just as a friend, or that I may want to run in a different direction.
Okay, I think the 400 responses came down to 3. So that was helpful. I think number one is to acknowledge that you have the gift of discernment already. It's already there. So the idea of preparing, I was like, well, how can you prepare for things that you don't really know specifically what's coming your way, but you know how to listen. You know how to make space to be with someone. You know that in the community, people are having sex in parks during COVID. I mean, nothing really necessarily shut down. Maybe somebody might have thought twice before having somebody come over or something. But a lot of the behaviors, and specifically, I'm going to kind of call out Black gay men. I'm just subgroup. That's it. Some of those behaviors continued. Maybe they got a little less. Maybe the drinking got a little more. But I think that it's believing in your own training, your own spiritual energy, discernment that is already there. So like you said, I'm a person who likes to prepare. Well, this is something you can't really prepare for. What you do is you dig into what you already know, and what you're uncomfortable about is there other people that you can refer this person to, or the organizations, a drug treatment program, or just offer a list. Sometimes it's just saying, well, what information would you like? Or I noticed that you're not as focused, and what's happening with you. But I guess I reacted to the word prepared for what's going to come. I think it's about acknowledging what has already been there, and you may see more of it. I'm trying to keep it as simple, because I can go off for the next 48 hours responding to this. But I believe in what you already have. Sometimes the abilities is already there. You just have to trust that it will come, that the words will come, that the spiritual discernment will come. Remember that you're connected to a higher power. Let that speak through you. And that you can prepare for. It'll just come through you. That's the best I could do.
And I quickly, RJ, if I can, just what Stephen is saying. Not that it has to be from the Bible, but one of the verses that come to mind in listening to Abigail and Stephen around this is in Job 34:4, and the latter part of that verse is the main thing, and that's let us learn together what is good. And if we come together to do that and create this toolbox of things that are good, people will be able to pull from it on discerning what works for them.
Oh. Woo! I love that. I love that. That is an amen. Ashe. Finger snap. And I would love to continue this conversation. I want to thank you all for making space so that we can publicly have this conversation about mental health, and also how to help our community and how to seek help and continue to support our community. I thank you for the tools and resources. So much of what I heard was kind of empowering, because it said, be present in community, that we can develop our own groups, that we have the tools to really support people because we're accustomed to supporting people, and to make referrals and have partnerships. Let the village take care of its residents. So I'm so thankful that you all are here today. Sure.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt this, but this is what just came through to me. That as the faith leaders, or you're maybe the face or the head, you guys need to have your own self-care as well. Because a lot of times mental health people, folks of faith leadership, you're constantly pouring out. How are you being replenished? Who are you speaking to? Are you eating right? Are you drinking water? Are you taking the walks outside? I think it's really, even us guys, I'll just assume for us for this session, we as mental health professionals, we know we have to take care of ourselves, because if we're depleted, what are we going to give to the folks that's reaching out to us for help? So that's just something I wanted to throw out there, that as leaders and people, encouragers, you too have to feed yourselves.
And I just want to add on something else additionally, if I may, for just a quick second. There was a question on the floor around self, and I just really wanted to address that really quickly. Right now, there's not a soul in here that doesn't feel that they are a different self than they were prior to the pandemic. We are all going through this together as a collective. The self we were prior is a different self that we are today. Now, it's truly up to you, the individual, to determine on if you want to go back to your original self, or if you want to move to a newer self, or if you want to stay the current self that you're in now. But that is through agency. That is through the ability to determine on what you are going to do, right? And right now, this is the thing. We're going through everything, and we are not truly our natural selves, because we're going through an unnatural moment, and that is okay. But do not be hard on yourself, because see, when you're hard on yourself, right, you can't move forward with yourself. So stay in the moment, and if it is in your spirit to move or change, and you have recognized for yourself that you need to make a change, then you will. But if you haven't recognized that you don't need to change, then it will not happen. It will not come to fruition. And that's all I wanted to leave you with. Self-compassion, self-love. It's a beautiful thing to have. Thank you.
Woo! That was powerful. That was powerful. Thank you. Grace, having grace, the same grace that we extend to others, extending that to ourselves. That's what that sounds like to me. I know you all just made statements, but are there any last statements that you all would like to to our declarations before we shut down for the evening. This has been really rich and empowering for me and our audience. Any other statements from the masterminds? You are some awesome individuals.
Well, I would like to throw out that the church was the very first mental health clinic that we had as Black people. It was the one institution during slavery and after slavery that we were allowed to build. It was the first. It was the one place that we could sing, we could dance, we could yell, we could cry, and we could be heard, and we could have family and community. The church was the first mental health clinic. There was no support group when you left the plantation. There was no, therapist, a counselor to help you, adjust from the trauma you just went through. The church was that place. So I'm imploring, those folks of faith of whatever denomination, collective you're part of, that was our first mental health clinic. So the more that our current organizations can partner and evolve with the information that can be added to one's spiritual leadership and energy, add in that mental health component that we know exists now, and infuse that into your community to whatever degree that you can. And let me just say one more thing, and I apologize for taking up so much time. But Black people are getting therapy far more than they ever have, because there's more people that look like us. There's less, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson talks about it. So many other, rappers and other people are talking about mental health. That's what's come out of this whole trauma of COVID. People are talking about mental health. So I just want to throw that out and just recognize the church was the very first mental health clinic.
I'll go ahead and go. I think someone needs to hear this right now, but I want to say the greatest lie that has ever been told is that you don't deserve to be loved. And if God is love, then the truth is already within you, because love is there with you. The root to many things is because we didn't feel that we were loved. We didn't feel like we were accepted. We didn't feel that we were good enough. We're not this, we're not that. But we are. We are. Your life was already paid for. Your path was already created. You just walk into your purpose, whatever that is and whatever that may be. You have a right, a divine right to exist and to live fruitfully in any space you decide to occupy. And I just wanted to share that with you all. Thank you.
Powerful.
And I want to normalize mental wellness. And that is, we do everything to get our bodies in shape. Go to the doctor, we brush our teeth, get our teeth clean, we get our eyes checked. We even do things to beautify ourselves on the outside. And things to encourage and build up our inner spirit. And it's the same with mental wellness. Like, get your mind checked. One of the things that I do with some people who have been resistant is we don't really think about the brain, and the brain is really an organ. It's just an organ. It's a powerful organ, just like the heart, the liver, the pancreas. And I say, if you check your blood pressure and your blood pressure is too high or too low, you're going to address that, right? If you check your blood sugar and your blood sugar level is too high or too low, you're going to address that, right? And it's the same about the mental wellness. Get your mind checked. If you have to ask, am I okay? 9 times out of 10, you're probably not okay. And just make an appointment to get what's called a consultation, to see what a professional has to say about where you are in your mental wellness. And for some of us, just like if we need insulin, if we need blood pressure pills, we may have to take some kind of medication to make our mental wellness balanced. It's the same thing.
Words of wisdom, and I can say amen and ashe. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, to our audience, Dr. Katrina Roseboro-Marsh, Abigail Skinner, and Stephen Welch. Please look them up on Psychology Today if you're looking for a therapist. We thank you for joining us at LGBT Faith Leaders of African Descent, and we hope to see you next month on the next FLoAD conversation. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you in the future. Be well and be safe. Good night.